The meeting of the Safety and Committee. It is 5 o'clock on Tuesday, October 3rd. Brock Heath to my left, John Terwilliger to my right. I asked for this meeting a month ago due to the public outcry on the bike lanes in Troy, the 2 dedicated bike lanes, and the possibility of further ones. Large amount of people on social media, in person, phone calls, emails, and it just felt like we needed to take a step back, educate people as to what was going on, decide if this is something we want to pursue. And so that is the reason for the meeting tonight. The day after I requested that meeting, the city removed the Water Street bike lane, which we have gotten a lot of feedback from that, and it's very appreciated. But we still need to have a discussion. I met with a group of bicyclists, on September 7th, had a great conversation with them. And what brought that about was that we kept seeing this group on Adams Street and not in the bike lane. And so that has been an issue for people. Why are we have this bike lane, why aren't they in it? So that's going to be a part of this discussion too. I don't know if I want to jump to you or if I should just say a few more things. I guess I will just say some of the things I have found in a boatload of reading. This is the hard copy of the packet. I've spent hours reading this, looking at some of the websites the city has referenced, and there's a lot of information. It's very detailed and it's very overwhelming, but it's out there. Some things I would like for the city to consider as they move forward would be costs of design, planning, and implementation. Do we as a city have those resources to do all of that? Costs of long-term maintenance and the cost of enforcing the rules in the bike lanes. It's very easy to paint stripes on a road and say, here it is, but we have to look at the long term. And I know that there is grant money available when you put in bike lanes. I have a whole page of things that you can get money for if you meet different requirements. So it's not completely paid for by these grants, but I know there's money out there. But that doesn't necessarily cover the cost of design and implementation, doesn't cover long-term maintenance, nor does it cover the cost of enforcement. So those are some things I'd like the city to consider. The city is citing the urban planning, where is it here? The Urban Bikeway Design Guide for urban areas. Troy does not qualify as an urban area, but we're using an urban bikeway design. An urbanized area is 50,000 or more people. We are considered an urban cluster outside of an urban area. So the bike lanes, all the bike stuff that we're looking at is for an urban area, and that needs to be taken into consideration. Anything that is done here in Troy should fit the city of Troy. It doesn't have to be at such a massive implementation that a big city would do. Is my time up?
I don't see her in here.
This is a page I printed from the U.S. Department of Transportation. These are all the things that they will help fund, where there's money available. I know that. It just doesn't all fit Troy. The stuff that if you looked at the packet, I just picked several different comments from Facebook to to put on the packet to show some of the comments. I included positive comments. The negative comments have been overwhelming on one side. We've had a handful, could probably count on one hand, the number of positive comments that I received personally. They may have been other places, but personally for me, about 5 or 6. I see some people here in the audience. I don't know if there's anybody here that has something they'd like to say. I don't know if you would like to say something first, Patrick?
Well, I think it's important to talk a little bit more about some of the information, misinformation, some of the future plans that we've got, and frankly the reasons why for 44 years we've been a bike-friendly community, and why we continue to excel in the region as a bike-friendly community. It's not because it's a social or cultural desire of ours solely. There are very practical reasons why we have done it and why we will continue to do it. But before I get into that, just want to clarify, you mentioned some considerations for us to take into account as we look at bike facilities. And I want to clarify because you talk about the cost of design and implementation, the cost of maintenance, and the enforcing the rules in the lanes. Creating and maintaining bike lanes or share roads, or cycle tracks for that reason, or for that matter, is very low. When you get into funding needs and grant needs, it's typically when you're talking about paths. We have several miles worth of paths in town. We began construction on those and have maintained those over the last 44 years. Bike lanes are in the road, they're in the asphalt. To date, we have not expanded any roads, widened any roads, acquired any right-of-way to create new bike lanes. So the cost part of it is very, very, very low. So I don't know if you were talking about bike paths or bike lanes. We do have to consider every year maintenance costs related to the bike paths, which are separate rec trail facilities off the road.
I'm talking more about the bike lanes.
Okay, the bike lanes, I'm not sure where you think that there's a high cost of design and maintenance.
Just in looking at some of the design plans, for instance, on Water Street, it was to move the sidewalks back and put in an island.
Okay, and so
And it's
then,
like, how do we get the
okay.
land for that?
That's
And-
why I wanted clarification.
Yeah.
So what you're referring to is the initial draft recommendations of the Riverfront Downtown Consultants Study. It's just a study that came from the consultants. It's still being finalized. Nothing's been set in stone. Nothing's been put into a long-term capital plan. And what you're seeing is some of the ideas that they have to develop dedicated lanes with buffers, and not only bike lane facilities, but also some outdoor recreational areas that are associated with those lanes to add interconnectivity. So that's a much more involved, and I guess my long answer to your consideration is yes, we absolutely will be considering that. And we will continue to be discussing with council those, because that is a larger long-term project. Okay. So I'm glad we clarified that. As far as us, and so your funding issues kind of go hand in hand with that. Yes, we can get some funding for that. Typically, we have to get into the cycle early, and it's several years out. So there would be that long-term planning and discussion and debate. With regards to urban areas versus urban centers, We can quibble about the terms. We are still part of the urban planning area in this region. And so from that standpoint, we are not considered a rural, we are considered more of an urban area.
No, we're not rural.
We are part of, we are members of the Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission. MVRPC for short, controls our access to any and all federal dollars related to surface transportation projects, congestion mitigation, or transportation enhancements. Those are all federal dollars that flow through them, that there are strict criteria that we have to follow if we want to have access to them. Their policy has been and continues to be, and it was just confirmed last month at their last meeting, that if anybody any member of their MPO or of the commission wants access to those funds, they must include an analysis and in consideration of bike and pedestrian friendly facilities, okay, whatever those facilities are. MVRPC follows more typically the NACTO standards. The NACTO and the AASHTO standards are just about the same. NACTO gets a little more detailed and complements AASHTO. That's really the main difference there. So they complement each other very well. We did a search of the last 10 years of federal funding that we've received for transportation, and these are road projects that we're talking about. We have received over $2 million worth of money that would not have been available had the policy been in place, because I can't verify that it was in place 10 years ago. But that's money that would have been at risk over the last 10 years to make improvements to our road system. In the next 5 years, we've got another $500,000 to $1 million programmed into the Transportation Improvement Program, which is a 5-year regional road capital improvement program that, again, MVRPC administers in their those strict standards and policies and regulations that we have to follow. In our long-term plan, which is also on file and is documented by MVRPC, and which also is used when it comes time to getting federal dollars for road improvements, resurfacing, et cetera. And that is a 20-year window, so it's truly long-term visionary thinking. We have in federal wants, if you will, just the federal portion, almost $45 million worth of projects there. These are projects that if we decide to ignore pedestrian-friendly facilities, we don't have access to them. That's not to say that we're going to do all 24 projects that are in that 20-year plan. Some of them are very high-level projects, but that's a pretty significant amount of money that we would never come up with ourselves.
So where do you draw the line as far as what project you're going to do? I mean, if the MVRPC is controlling all the money for the area and controlling federal dollars, and they're insisting that everybody has to do all this.
Okay, I don't want to single out MVRPC other than to say that they are our MPO, because
I
this
get
is
that.
the same.
Every area has their own.
This is a statewide. I can't verify that it's a nationwide standard. I do think that there is some federal, I don't know, recommendations. There may be some MVRPC staff here that can verify that, but I do know that that is a statewide requirement. Okay, so when MVRPC works with ODOT, works with the feds, you know, everybody is treated the same. So,
but where do you draw the line?
I'm not sure what your question is. You draw the line when you follow the standards and you look at, let's take West Main Street. Okay, that's a $216,000 grant that we will receive in 2 years to do the resurfacing part of West Main Street from here out to 75.
Right.
As part of the design plans of that project, even though we are looking at trying to do things from the ground up and really look at that whole section, we're required to look at whether or not pedestrian and bike facilities can be accommodated on that road. And we have to address and make sure that we are inclusive of all forms of transportation when we actually get that money. Okay, so it's not a matter of drawing the line. We can always, council can always reject a project before it gets in the 5-year plan, because once it gets in the 5-year plan, then we can get penalized for future projects.
So there's no
So-
opportunity to change your mind once it's in a 5-year plan?
Well, everything is done in at least a 5-year window. I mean, we had that discussion with the pedestrian bridge, knowing that that was an very early project, and we just wanted to have the discussion about it. It's the same thing. I mean, whether it's a bridge or it's a road improvement, a road extension, a widening, what have you.
So I guess with the bike lanes, is there going to be opportunity for council to see the plans before that is put into a plan?
When I looked
See a
at
draft.
when I looked at the long-range plan, and when I looked at the 5-year TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan, there is not one project that is under $50,000. So council will have an opportunity to look at every one of those projects if it in fact comes to you, meaning that we want to go to the construction part of it. There's already been some discussion, chatter, I would say, about the North Market Street project, the request for which you will see next week. In that project, in that recommendation, there is primarily, it's probably 50-50, share roads versus bike lanes, okay? And that's the reason why I focused in on your cost part of it, because adding the bike lanes does not take away the driving lanes that are recommended. It does not take away parking lanes, and it is not a buffered bike lane that would require certain infrastructure. So it's not like the downtown plan with the big cycle tracks. Okay, it's simply taking excess berm, if you will, on the sides of the roads and dedicating them to bike facilities where there is no parking now, and there shouldn't be any parking in the future, and using those just to connect. And then as the other part of that recommendation memo, you will also see a map that shows the connections where it connects to Fossway, to Adams, to Staunton, and back up to up Market, primarily through share roads, but a combination of bike lanes and share roads. You ask where it ends? Well, when you see that map, because you are seeing share roads versus bike lanes, because we are trying to accommodate bike lanes where we can without disenfranchising parking or not enough space widths, etc. And they all follow those two standards that I mentioned, the AASHTO and the NACTO standards.
I don't want to get into the North Market Street project, but, yeah.
We'll have opportunities to do that. I mean,
Okay.
whether it's marked as a bike lane or not, the bike lane capacity is going to be there in the project.
Okay.
Okay, we're not widening that road, we're not adding costs to that road construction project to accommodate bike lanes. It's a safer way to accommodate those folks coming out of Cricket and Robin Hood to travel south to Fossway. And the criteria that we're using and the justification that we have for doing that were included in your packet with the rather lengthy memo, but I had 20
It's lengthy.
exhibits. Well, I wanted to make sure that the committee understood that, you know, we follow the same guidelines as everybody else, that we're not just throwing these things out there, that we do follow the advice of our traffic engineers as well as the national standards that are out there, and there's rationality to it.
I want to make sure, and I think the residents of Troy want to know, that what will be done fits the demographics of our city, and that we're not just trying to be a large city, because that's how it feels.
Well, and I think that's a very common misunderstanding or misconception, that adding bike lanes makes us a big city. There are bike lanes, there are share roads, there are bike paths, there are all kinds of bike facilities, whether you're a large community or a small community. Because if even, you know, a small community like us, we still have high volume, high traffic roads. We still have an active, one of the more active, I think, cyclist populations and demographics in the region. We're known for it. We're proud of it. We market it. We embrace it. And so bike facilities are one more way to not only recognize and connect people who don't drive but want a bike. You know, it's also a quality of life issue, and that's something that needs to be true whether you're a small community or a large community. It also allows for diversity of our demographics, some of who are disadvantaged, don't own cars or don't have access to steady vehicular transportation, and need bike infrastructure, be it labeling, signage, markings, or dedicated bike lanes to get to and from either school, work, businesses, wherever.
Okay.
So it's not a big city issue per se.
All right. I have a list of things.
Could I?
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, in regards to big cities, small towns can also have big ideas. Small towns can be the leaders in good concepts. I'm not hung out here on Troy being a small, medium, or large community. I think it's a good community that can foster some really progressive ideas.
I think Troy has always been bike-friendly. I don't think that is in question. I had some things that I wanted to make sure we covered, which was the fact that there were a lot of people very upset. I wanted to address the comments from the meeting I had with the bicyclist group. I'm just going to run through this real quick. Wanted to encourage the city to focus on shared roads rather than dedicated lanes. Just had that discussion.
Well, we did, but before you go on from that, you know, keep in mind though too that when you look at the standards, shared roads make more sense in certain low volume roads as opposed to bike lanes that make more sense when you had high volume, faster traffic.
I understand that.
Okay, and that's why.
But we have a lot of side roads that people can take and not have to take a main road.
Well, they can take them, but the idea of, and it goes right back to the MVRPC and the federal funds, is that cyclists have the same rights on the road, provided they follow the same laws, that vehicles do. That has always been the case. So in essence, what you're saying is cyclists, well, just use the side streets. It may take you twice as long to get where you need to go, but take the side streets because we only want shared roads and not bike lanes.
I just don't know how we're going to do bike lanes and maintain, and that's not my expertise, so I know that's not my thing to find
what?
out. To maintain traffic. So how do we add bike lanes on Main Street without taking up traffic lanes?
I don't want to spoil your fun for when we have that discussion with the analysis that our consultant is doing. And honestly, that's not done yet. So we
Okay.
don't know exactly what that's going
But
to
you
look like.
understand that's a concern, because when you talk about dedicated bike lanes, I mean, we've seen what happened on Adams Street. We can only assume
I-
that there are traffic lanes that will be taken. And we have a hard time
Okay,
with that.
so very quickly, on the Adams Street lane, we didn't take a bike lane, or a traffic lane that was supposed to be there in the first place.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I've been here for 20
Yes, it
years, and
does,
that lane has been
Because we
there.
resurfaced that road, and I know, that doesn't mean that it's been right this whole time. Doesn't mean that when we resurfaced it, that we didn't have to reevaluate it. So, that's one thing. As we move forward with the bike lanes, you know, I think your comment may be inferred to mean that, you know, we're going to try to shove bike lanes in to the detriment
feels.
of
Traffic,
traffic.
vehicular
Um,
traffic.
Well, and besides the Adams Street, which we will debate until cows come home, as they say, but on Water Street, for example, these are the only two bike lanes we're talking about here.
Right
The
now.
Water Street one was a parking lane, not a traffic lane. It had absolutely no impact, well, it had only positive impact on traffic flow because it got cyclists who might have taken that side street and been in the travel lane and moved it off out of their vehicle's way. So that was curious as to how some of the comments evolved, especially early on.
Well, that's because we didn't see anybody using the bike lane.
Well, aside from those drivers that couldn't stay in their lane and rode over the ropes, which I will admit happened too often, I can tell you that there was eyewitness accounts of people using that lane.
Oh, we saw
It's
a
not
few.
the same, you're never going to, I won't say never, but you're rarely going to see the same amount of bike lane traffic as you are vehicular traffic. I don't know, we were trying to find the ratio, and it varies by region and by probably parts of the country, honestly. So I can't give you for every 100 cars, the average is one cyclist. So no, it was not the same level of activity that you saw with vehicles going up and down Water Street. But it was used, and anecdotally, we did hear comments about, especially people from outside the region, who finally found the connection to get from the bike path to the downtown and back.
Which brings me to my next point. Focus on wayfinding and signage.
Okay, so as I state in this document, we're doing several things, and we continue to do several things. Over the last few months, we have continued to improve the wayfinding, and we're going to be doing even more on that. Not only for those folks who are on the path and want to stay on the path, which is known as 25, that's the regional
Which is
route.
very confusing when we have
It
25A.
is, we didn't pick it, but that's what we've got. But also to get folks from the path to the downtown and through the downtown. And we're starting to look at ways to do that. We can't get too aggressive on that because there are several initiatives that are going on. One, right now, we've got the riverfront study that hasn't been completed yet. Number two, we've got the Great Miami Riverway Regional Cooperative Effort and their branding and some kiosks and some ideas they've got to do some messaging all the way up and down the, what did we say, how many miles did we say that was?
In town, 9.4.
No, from
Close
Sydney.
to 400 now.
Yeah, no, I mean the river corridor, Great Miami Riverway. Thank you. So they're working on that as well. The county park district has a countywide, the yellow and black signs, and so once we get the branding initiative together, and we coordinate with the Great Miami Riverway project and the Park District project, because the Park District, we will be erecting at least 2, if not 4, signs that will not only point people off the path and tell them directions, but also will have directions, wayfinding to specific businesses downtown, so we can get the corridor better signed. That is something that we are working on.
And
That's not the only
we're looking
thing, though.
forward to that.
Well, and so that's not the only thing, that's only one part of the overall strategy. I mean, we're working, we continue to work on marketing materials. The mayor's cycling advocacy committee has done, a great job of putting some materials together in concert with Troy Main Street, creating a business, bike-friendly business program, for example, creating a community brochure that talks about, that's the mapping, but a community brochure that talks about all of the different bicycle facilities and features that we have here in town. You mentioned you just pointed out the copied
Can you all see this?
program. That's the bike-friendly
This is the
thing.
size of the sticker on the windows. It
Yes.
can't be seen.
Well, it can when you're walking downtown and you want to stop in a restroom and that's a bike-friendly business, which is what the program is all about. That's part of the strategy. Okay, so we are working on, once we get the maps updated, once we get the branding in place, we're going to then add to we're going to update the maps, we're going to work with Troy Main Street, we're going to update the kiosks that we've got. I think we said we've got 6 kiosks, 4 downtown, and 2 of them in a couple points along the bike path, with the maps that show not only the bike routes, but also bike-friendly businesses and some of the other items of interest, if you will, points of interest.
27 businesses have public bathrooms, provide water. What's the other things? They have bicycle parking, but they don't, because they're not allowed to have those on the street, on the sidewalk.
No, that's
so-
not true. Ma'am, that is not true. The law says you cannot ride them on the sidewalk.
Right.
Okay, so
So bikes are
responsible
putting
bikes,
their stuff up
responsible
against the
cyclists-
window.
Responsible cyclists, and I've seen them, and I think we've all seen them, get off their bikes and walk their bikes on the sidewalks. That's what, you're allowed to do that.
Okay, I
And we
just
have bike
hang on.
racks throughout downtown, and we've actually talked about adding 4 or 6 more of them downtown.
Well, I just talked to Pachamama Market, and she's like.
She doesn't have one. She's one that we're looking at adding. You're right.
That would
We
be
don't
great.
have a bike rack in front of every business.
But I
Hey,
think
when you're
people
a
will be
bike-
thrilled to know that there are 27 public bathrooms and that they provide water downtown for people. How awesome is that?
Okay. I don't disagree. Is there a question there?
Well, how come we don't know that there are 27 public bathrooms downtown? And that water's
I-
handed out?
It's
The bike-friendly community, to become a member of that, what we were trying to do is to get bikers off the trail downtown as an economic factor to our community. Those persons, those businesses that chose to become members, the request was that you have a location where a person could put a bike. We will currently provide some parking, and in the future, we wish to get more parking available. That if they come to your business and they request water to fill up their thermos, or some businesses got those little water bottles, the smaller ones, which they gave as a business-friendly promotion, and if there was a restroom available and the bikers needed it, they agreed to use it. If they did not have one, they could make a recommendation as to where one could go to use a public facility. The program was spearheaded through Main Street. It was in the paper. That's where the
And
the map?
it is on our website. I believe we also had some social media when it opened up. I mean, we can't remind people once a week. We would simply overwhelm them with all the information on everything, because the bike issue is not the only thing that we do here in Troy. So, like any other community. So, the marketing, on the backside of that particular handout is a map.
Well,
We have several maps, because I know one of the comments that you received is, why don't we create an app? An app would be extremely difficult and expensive to do because they vary so much and they can change so much. So MVRPC has a regional, they call it a mobile website because it's more flexible. But there's also a regional map that we have copies available, and I believe they have some downtown, but whenever we run out, we can always get more. And we have other literature that goes out every so often. Of course, we do a lot of, we're doing more and more events that are bike-friendly type events to promote the diversity of bicycles in the community. Education and outreach was the, I guess, the third leg, if you will, of that, the bike-friendly stool.
and I agree that everybody needs to understand that shared roads are the law. But I want to get back to the reason we're here. I mean, all this information is great, and this will all continue. But I want to make sure that we talk about why people see the club bikers on the roads and not in the bike lanes. People are not comfortable riding in the bike lanes. They're still on the sidewalks. We see more bikes on the sidewalks than people walking in the bike lanes. So that's an issue.
I think I agree that it's happening. I don't necessarily agree with your reasoning as to why that's happening. I think part of it is that they don't know that the bike lanes are there. We have not gotten all the connections together. We try to enforce as nicely as possible people not riding on the sidewalks, but frankly, if there's a sidewalk and it's off the road and there's nobody walking up ahead, people are going to use the sidewalks to ride their bikes. The group that you talk to is a very experienced group, from my understanding. They are extremely comfortable, and actually more comfortable riding with the traffic in the traffic lane than they are on bike lanes on bike lanes. Bike lanes are not for those folks. They don't need bike lanes. Those folks make up, in our area, 17% of the cycling community.
Did you
And
read
that's not far
Did you read
off.
the comments that I wrote down
Yeah,
from that
I
group?
read them, sure.
They
And-
don't,
and from their
they don't see the
perspective-
need from the bike lanes either.
Okay, so that 17% doesn't need them. I don't disagree with them. But bike lanes are not set up for that 17% of experienced riders. They're set up for the other 83% who are disadvantaged, not confident, not experienced, scared, and don't want to be in the travel lane with drivers who frankly are getting more and more distracted.
I'm going to read a couple of things, just notes that I made that I wanted to point out. Just highlighting and this is from AASHTO, a community's existing street system may be fully adequate for efficient bicycle travel, and signing and striping for bicycle use may be unnecessary. Just one comment. Some routes may not be considered high bicycle demand corridors, and it would be inappropriate to designate them as bikeways regardless of roadway conditions. So there's all
Okay.
kinds of things to consider.
There's, yes, and you've used the word may a couple times in that,
And I get that. We just want to know that the city is taking into consideration
okay,
our city.
all right.
And that we're not
So-
trying to make us into somebody else.
So let me jump to the recommendation of,
No.
thing. Well, no, and the reason I'm saying this is because as I mentioned earlier, first of all, we're following the guidelines in NACTO and AASHTO. What you read is, I don't know if it was verbatim because I don't have it in front of me, but it probably is, okay? AASHTO, NACTO, they give you that flexibility. They give you the guidelines. They say if you're going to put a bike lane, here are the required features that you need to have. Here's some other features. Here are the benefits. Here's when it makes more sense to do that. Here's when you really should consider using bike lanes versus shared roads. The point there is that there is not one solution every single time. And the reason I'm talking about this recommendation at the bottom is not the recommendation itself, but just to show you that by us having this flexibility, it has allowed us not to just add bike lanes, but to not add a bike lane in one very specific recent example, and that is Dorset Road, which, when you look at the AASHTO and the NACTO standards, a bike lane is warranted. When you look at some of the other factors that our traffic engineer and our engineering staff looked at in giving us advice as to whether or not they should go ahead and put bike lanes or not, they considered, I won't say tangential, but less direct, more subjective type things, okay? Such as the number of intersections and the widths of those intersections, and given the fact that Dorset and McCaig is still a flashing light, the fact that we have parking on both sides, the fact that we have a lot of curb cuts as you go along that road, even though it is a 35-mile-an-hour road. So there are other circumstances.
And that's what we want to know.
And it goes both ways. We are not going to, the bottom line is we have not and will not shove bike lanes in wherever we can just for the sake of saying that we have bike lanes.
Good.
We've said that before, and we'll continue to say that.
I'm going to read you another line here. Bike lanes are established with appropriate pavement markings where there is significant bicycle demand and where there are distinct needs. Just something to consider. Understand community capacity and desires. Surface infrastructure should match the scale and use of the lane. The needs of both the motorist and the bicyclist must be considered. You're doing all that. That's great.
Okay.
We just want to know that there's going to be more information given before they go in, some more discussion.
And so, which is why the recommendation here is to improve upon the complete streets verbiage, to include the references to the national guidelines so that people know that we are referring to the standards that you just read, that don't say you shall, you must, they say you may. They give you that flexibility. They give us that flexibility. Frankly, I'm not the one that makes that call. The mayor's not the one that makes that call, nor should the council make that call. That really should be the professional staff from our engineering and our traffic engineer who does this kind of stuff for a living. Recognizing that getting input from the experienced riders, the ones that really know the cycling community very well. We also felt it would be appropriate, since the mayor's cycling advocacy committee meets very regularly and has a lot of community, local experience, that talking with them, identifying any issues that they might see before we would make any kind of decisions, we felt that was important. And so we felt that, okay, we ought to put that in the policy as well, so that it's written down, council approves the policy, so it's there as part of our criteria in evaluating whether we add the lanes or we recommend them as part of larger projects.
Okay. I want to talk about the group that I met with on 9/7 because I think it's very misunderstood as to why they don't use the bike lanes. I had a lot of notes from them. I don't know, is there anybody in the audience that has anything to say at this point? Any comments?
Good afternoon. I'm Maury Wyckoff, and I was part of that group on the 7th. I'm an avid cyclist. One of the things that I think is important to look at here is the connection between things. What I'm hearing is bike lanes here, bike lanes there, information about downtown. One of the critical things is what happens when you get to the end of that place you're on. When we're cyclists, we're rolling. We're not stopping and trying to think of where we're going to go next. And so having signage that says, bike lane ends, do this, or downtown over here, or there is a transition. When we saw the bike lane go up on Water Street, I saw that there was some markings on the pavement as if there was going to be big, broad paint stripes at the intersections. But it was done in such an incomplete manner that nobody knew what that meant, and there was not signage to alert the motorist, hey, by the way, you got to look both ways because on this side of the road you have bicyclists going in both directions. So in doing any of these things, I would encourage that you really think about the complete nature of it and what happens at the end of the bike lane, whether it's on Main Street, whether it's on McKeag, whatever, and let the motorists know the transitions, let the bicyclists know the transitions so that it is clear. I think that's one thing that would make a lot of these things go smoother. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? One of the...
I'm Walter Burton, and I was also part of the group that met with you back when. I'm also, I guess, part of that 17%. My feeling is that a situation that we feel puts us at danger or at risk puts that other 83% at risk, whether they realize it or not. Our primary concern with the bike lanes on both Adams Street and Water Street are when you're traveling in the opposite direction to the nearest traffic lane. For instance, we pull up, we cross the bridge on Adams Street, go past Hobart, you come up to a four-way stop. As a cyclist, you're in the right-hand lane. When it comes your turn to go through that four-way stop sign, you proceed forward, you're in the right-hand lane of the road. How are you supposed to, there's nothing to instruct you or the vehicular traffic as to how you're supposed to enter that bike lane that's on the far side of the road, and when you get to the end of it, there's nothing to indicate how you're supposed to safely exit that. And the problem on Water Street was compounded because, as Maury said, at each intersection there was a real question about right-of-way. As a cyclist, when we're riding in the traffic, the right-of-way is clearly defined. But when we're traveling, for instance, on the Water Street going westbound, and we come up to one of those side streets, and we're rolling through and a car is pulling out, they don't see us because they're looking looking left if they're turning right. Who is at fault? And that was the problem that we had, why we would ride in on Water Street going eastbound, but we wouldn't ride going westbound. That was our primary concern. It was. I appreciate cycling infrastructure when it adds to the safety, adds to the convenience, but both of those bike lanes, I feel, were improperly designed and constructed for use by cyclists. Thank you.
One thing that they pointed out was that how very important it is for behavior to be predictable. That when you are riding or whether you're driving a car, you should have some fairly predictable behavior from a vehicle or from a cyclist. Bike lanes kind of make that behavior unpredictable because you don't know what that person's going to do when they get to the end of a bike lane. And that has been an issue. And so I would encourage the people in Troy to think of bicyclists as vehicles. And they're coming along, they're in the same lane, they're slower, but they're doing the same thing. And it should be predictable what they're gonna do, if they're gonna turn right, if they're gonna turn left. The same as you should be able to predict what a car's gonna do, although that's not always easy to do. You don't always know. Bike lanes kind of complicate that, so please take that into consideration.
And if I can comment on the wayfinding comments, they are appreciated and are noted. And we are going to be improving that as part of, like, that map that you see, for example, with the North Market Street. We are going to be adding that kind of signage and direction to make it more predictable. I think one of the other things I would say about bike lanes is, yes, it gets people out of the travel lane. By doing that, some folks that may not be as experienced may get a false sense of safety, when in fact it's just a white line, and there's not a 4-foot tall concrete barrier that's
And you might
guarding
have-
them from a car, because whether the car's at fault or not, the 2,000-pound car wins against a bicyclist every time.
And a bicyclist is going to win against a pedestrian.
Sure, yeah, and that's why the priority for protection might seem opposite to what vehicular drivers always think, so.
I think it is a good thing for the city to focus more on shared roads and signage for starters. Try that. Maybe put off the bike lanes, dedicated bike lanes, until we have some signage up.
Okay.
I think shared lanes are good
It's not
for
always
Troy.
going to be able to be, with the bigger projects, which are the ones we're really talking about in the future anyway.
Okay.
That is a consideration in the design and the implementation and the construction. So again, it's duly noted, and that's just part of good engineering with our consultants, with our staff, with our traffic engineer. And so I understand that. We get it.
Okay. Another point with the bicycling groups, the clubs that are out, they can ride single file or they can ride two abreast. This club told me, and I didn't realize this, they'll ride 2, 1, 2. So it may look like they're riding 3, which might upset people. People need to know, they can ride 2, 1, 2, or they can ride single file. Do I have that right?
Yeah, the only law that's local, and I believe it's also state, but it's definitely local, is that you cannot ride more than 2 abreast. So
Right.
they could go 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 1 if they want to.
But sometimes people get upset and yell out the window because they think they're riding more than, but
Well,
people don't know that.
I would consider it a blessing if all you did is get yelled at, because sometimes you get more than just a yell. But
The other thing
maybe that's
is
me, I don't know.
not stopping at stop signs.
And that is that is part of the education piece that we are working
Well,
with.
if you are a club rider and you're moving and you don't stop, you are scanning ahead and looking to see, is that car going to get there first? Or am I going to get there first? If the car's going to get there, they will typically slow down and let the car go. Club
Okay,
bike lists,
but-
for the most part, are clipped into their pedals.
Well, they do that at their own risk, because the law says that they have to obey all the traffic
Well,
laws. I mean, that's the bottom line.
but this is something people don't
I
understand.
know that there was some consideration, some discussion at the state level, of the state legislature, I believe, last session, about modifying that through stop signs. Don't believe that passed, so the law is still the law. I'm not sure where your comment is going on
I'm
that.
just wanting people to understand
I get
that
it.
that is kind of, I mean, that's why I talk to them, to get a little bit of information about why not in the bike lane. The other issue is debris in the bike lane.
We are, regularly, we sweep those. We have an issue on the decking of the Adams Street overpass. It's about ready to need some reconstruction work in the next few years. But other than that, yes, debris, I mean, car tires do push the debris to the side of the road. But that's true whether it's a dedicated bike lane or if it's a share road. So, if you're cycling on a road, you're going to have that issue whether it's dedicated as a bike lane or not.
Well, one more thing, and I don't think we're really accomplishing too much here other than just, I mean, it's educational for sure. I'm going to make one more request.
Can I play off your educational?
Yeah,
A lot of the issues that we've talked about, the base level is education of riders, and the Mayor's Advocacy Group is in preparation of starting with the cooperation of our local schools. A lot of you have had kids or grandchildren take part in the fire and police departments put on summer safety town programs. We are going to be starting within, the development of the curriculum, so a half a year or so in 4th through 6th grade and junior high, we're going to be developing in part of the physical education programs a minimal level of bike safety, road safety education to hopefully start that component at the first level. And I know we've also had some comment from adults who are willing and considering adult education programs on biking and biking safety. We're also going to try to come up with a small 3x5 carry it with you card that specifically will tell you about the rules in Troy, like downtown, hot spots, a uniquely individual safety card. So that's an educational component we're trying to work towards.
please do a better job of communicating. I think people have been very frustrated with the lack of communication.
Can you be more specific on additional
Well-
communication, since we have been out on social media?
I know, and
You
people
brought
need to
it up
take
several times that-
responsibility on how they get their information. They need to
If
keep
there are other avenues
themselves
that we need
informed.
to use, we're more than happy to use them. We want to reach out as much as we possibly can, but there are limits to what we can do if people don't want to receive the information that we're sending out.
Understand. My last request is, I am asking this committee to make a recommendation to council for a resolution to remove the Adams Street bike lane. I have asked about that and been told no. I see the only way forward to get that removed is to ask for a resolution. The schools did what they could to alleviate the traffic on Adams Street, and the city put that bike lane in, and it has complicated things all over again.
I'm not sure what you mean by complicating things. I disagree with that. I mean,
I disagree with you.
Well, I mean, we've been out there and we have observed the traffic during the two 20-minute peak times.
I have observed the traffic, and it's complicated, and it's frustrating. So I am asking for a resolution that will remove the Adams Street bike lane. I don't know how that's done, and Mr. Kerber's not here. Grant, can you please advise how that works?
It would not be a resolution. First off, if you wanted to get involved in a particular traffic matter, the city council has already granted the service and safety director authority to make those decisions because, with the traffic engineering and things of that nature, council doesn't get involved in the placement of every stop sign or stop.
But in the codified ordinance 305, it says that we can override that.
Well, I wasn't completed yet. I said, you've granted that authority. However, it's subject to the ordinance of city council. So first off, it was passed as an ordinance, so you'd have to have an ordinance to make any change with that regard.
What was passed as an ordinance?
The grant of authority.
To give him the authority?
Well, not him directly, his office.
Well, no, the Adams Street bike lane never came up as an ordinance.
I understand, but the grant of authority to make those decisions was passed by an ordinance.
Okay.
Years and years ago. It's with the codified ordinances.
So,
There was not an ordinance that was passed specific to the Adams Street. That's what Mr. Kerber is talking about, is the authority that I believe, I may be off, but it's an ordinance, it was a blanket ordinance that was done in the 1950s, 60s, something like that.
and
Not specific to
doesn't
bike lanes.
305 give us the opportunity to introduce a resolution and take back?
I think we
some
might
of
be
that?
caught on semantics. Council does have authority to make certain decisions or to limit the authority of the service and safety director. That would be done by ordinance, not by resolution.
Well, it reads resolution. It says, notwithstanding the provisions of sections 305.01 to 305.03 inclusive, council may override any decision of the Director of Public Safety, Public Service and Safety made under the provisions of section 305.03 and may assume any of the powers delegated to the Director of Public Service and Safety under the provisions of section 305.03 by resolution adopted by a majority of members of council.
The process is same for a resolution or an ordinance. It really,
Then I'm requesting an ordinance.
okay.
That
And
would
you do
remove-
have that, the council does have that authority to
So that's what
put
I'm
limitations.
proposing. That's what I'm proposing, then, an ordinance.
Okay.
And so, just following this through, if the bike lane is removed, then what? We cannot recommend that that go back to a travel lane. The warrants, from a traffic standpoint, do not merit 2 traffic lanes in there. I'm not making it up. It's not me that's making that decision. I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't
So-
read the manual of uniform traffic code and analyze it. I'm telling you that that's the way it is. So if, as part of your ordinance, to require us to return two travel lanes to Adams Street, then I guess the question for Mr. Kerber is that what kind of, and maybe we need to go into executive session to discuss this, what kind of legal liability could that open us up to in the future if we do something that is not warranted, just to eliminate a bike lane?
Well, what
Because
kind
we
of
can-
legal
we
issue
can
was there when it was
stripe
put
that-
in?
We can just stripe that as dead space as an option. That's why I want some clarification as to what you want us to do.
I
Yes,
want
sir?
it to go back to a traffic lane.
Now, you just said it cannot be marked as a traffic lane, correct?
I'm saying that we would not recommend that it be restored to a traffic lane.
Based on the last 20 years that I've lived here, I feel pretty okay saying it can go back to a traffic lane.
On what basis? The fact that you've been here for 20 years?
Precedence,
What precedence?
that it was a traffic lane for 20 years. The 20 years, and it's been longer than that. I've only been here 20 years. So I don't know how to move forward, but that's what I'm asking.
Well, I think you've made a recommendation to the other members of the committee, and since this is a committee meeting, I think that the next step is that
And
You
I
see
need
if
to
there's a
ask
majority
both of them
opinion
if they
that's-
have any further comments or questions.
well, and whether there's majority support for that.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
Do you guys have any questions or comments?
I do, but Mr., go ahead.
Well, I would be curious, and I would definitely want it to be known and be clear that if you get rid of it, and for whatever reason legally it cannot go back to what it might have been 20 years ago, I don't know that either or, but then you'd lose the one on the other side and you'd be down to a 2-lane road. So I would want that to be made clear, and I'd also like, I'm not quite certain we're kind of invading territory that micromanages things,
What are we micromanaging?
the whole world.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I just am part of a different ward, but I've heard a lot of positive things about the bike lanes. I live I'm on the west side, and I'm part of that ward over there. And I've had a lot of bicyclists approach and say, we have no good way to get east across either Main Street or McCaig. So a lot of them are very excited about having some kind of a shared lane or dedicated even across there to get back and forth. And I would caution the Facebook thing. People have no filters on Facebook a lot of times. Out of 25,000 people, I don't know how many are adults, let's say half just to talk here, 12,000. You may have gotten multiple hundreds of comments, I'm not sure. So let's say you got 300 comments on there. Out of 12,000 people, and it's just not a huge sample of what the citizens of Troy want or desire based on Facebook. Facebook, people can hide behind names and get very passionate on there in ways that they normally would not. When I've talked to people about different issues coming up, I run into them walking my dog. I've seen them comment on negative things on Facebook. I approach them and say, hey, I saw that thing on Facebook, what's going on? And they are they're much less passionate and much less fired up in real life. So the Facebook thing, I wouldn't even say take it like as a grain of salt. I would say,
Well, I also said
yeah, that's
in-person conversations.
right,
phone-
right. I'm not saying you specifically. I'm just saying Facebook in general is not a good sampling of what people believe from what I've experienced, both professionally and personally. So beware of that, everyone in the community, not just you. As I go around and talk to people, most people don't care, is what I'm running into. They want to put bike lanes in, that's perfect, it doesn't matter, it's not going to cost a lot, whatever. So that's kind of what I've seen. I know that you've run into a lot of people that are passionate, like, are in arms, saying this is ridiculous, I can't believe we're doing this. And I want people to know that that's not the only opinion out there, and I haven't felt that really in a lot of ways.
I will say, it is not the only opinion,
Right,
but the negative has been overwhelmingly.
to you.
And there is no decision that this council will make or that the city will make that will make everybody happy.
Right,
And we know that.
yep.
There is no decision that will make everybody happy.
So in that
But
same
when we
breath,
hear from such a
I would
large
say,
amount-
I'm going to continue my comments, I appreciate it. I would say in that same breath, you said that they're overwhelmingly negative, when in reality for me, it's been overwhelmingly positive, or positive and neutral is overwhelming any kind of negative that I've seen. So
Then we should vote, however.
I will.
A couple of hands out here.
I think my comments are done, apparently.
No?
Go ahead, I'm done. That's it?
Any comments out here? Saw a couple of hands.
Linda Sponsler, I live at 608 Shaftesbury Road. I lived here before the Adams Street Extension Bridge was put in. It was initially put in as a safety measure to get fire trucks and ambulances to that end of town and not have to cross the railroad track. I realize there's a fire station out there now. If that squad is out on a call and I'm having a heart attack at 2:30, I'm probably gonna die because you can't get through on Adams Street when school's letting out on a school day. And my other question about that is, I do live on Shaftesbury. That lane ends. And if that bicyclist is headed east, they are now on the wrong side of the road, and what are they supposed to do? I posted that question, I believe, on the police department, and nobody ever answered it. I've seen bikes, the few bikes that I have seen using it, they fly right through that corner. The person pulling out doesn't notice them. What's going to happen to them? They're going to be hurt. And I don't understand what they're supposed to do there. It seems to me they should have to cross the street to become now riding on the correct side of the road. I don't know if anybody can answer that question. But I would like to see Adams Street go to a shared lane. Because how is an emergency vehicle going to get through there? If they pick me up and they're trying to go through there. They aren't going to fit in that bike lane to go around the traffic, I don't believe. So then what happens? And I don't dislike bikes. I've complained about a farm vehicle on 202 many more times than I've complained about a bike on the street slowing me down. So everybody has a right to the road, and I understand that. But I think we are still a small town, and we need to look at the fact that that was put in as a 4-lane road. I don't know why we're saying it wasn't. It was. And it needs to go back to that and be shared with the bicycles as it was before. Thank you.
As a shared lane.
Lester Connor, 1210 South Clay Street. Mr. Titherton says no roads have been widened because of designated bike areas, lanes. But with the bike lanes, we have lost roadage for the motorist. So, you know, I mean, we're making a problem there. I mean, if it's good enough, I mean, it's been a thing in the past of shared roads. We've got along fine. I think we ought to stay with shared roads and eliminate bike paths on our main drags and on the roads. We have the walk areas in the woods and bike paths in the woods and everything else. That's fine and dandy. But on the streets, let's don't take anything away from the motorists. Let's just share the road with the bicyclists and get along. I think Mr. Titherton and Mayor Beamish need to talk with, oh, you're smiling, I like that. You're smiling. I like to see him talk with some of these bicycle clubs rather than a consultant. It's cheaper to talk to a bicyclist and know the roads and know what's going on than a consultant. It would save the citizens a lot of money that way too. And you said, you know, cost to date for bike lanes is, you know, I'm wondering, what is the cost so far that we spent on it? We put those little white things out there on Adams Street, and it, you know, all of a sudden, bam, they're up there, and it scared people to death. Oh my God, what's going on here? You know, it's another hazard for people. I just don't understand it. I mean, I know that you said that you like to listen to the people, but we've taken a survey twice in the paper about Treasure Island, and they voted no all the time unanimously. They didn't want it. But you never listened to them, so you went ahead and had Treasure Island. You know, why say you're going to listen to the people when you're not? It's stupid. I mean, we know you ain't going to listen to us. And all this stuff like the donut thing, it's great for downtown businesses, but for the citizens of Troy, it's an inconvenience. We can't even use our own streets or anything because of that. You know, I mean, I just don't understand it. I mean, if you want businesses to survive, then let's get some more jobs into Troy, not bicyclists, let's get jobs into Troy. Something that's maintained and will give you income. You aren't going to survive, Troy will not survive on tourism. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll say it to my last breath. Troy cannot survive on tourism. What are we going to see? Adams Street, we're going to see the bridge. You know, what is there to see here in Troy? Nothing.
Thank you, Lester.
Pardon?
Thank you.
And I want to give you thanks for standing up for the people and doing something. You're a great lady.
I think the overall comments, Troy is bike friendly. I don't think we ever want to change that.
Good afternoon, my name is William Lutz, 801 East Franklin Street in Troy. Today's meeting notice stated that we were to have a discussion of amending the Complete Streets policy to define and clarify the scope, extent, decision-making steps, including public notification processes prior to decisions related to adding bike lane roads, bike shared roads versus dedicated bike lanes. And the operative phrase to me is public notification processes. And I was very happy to see in Mr. Titterington's memo that he added an amendment to Section 7, a proposed amendment to notify and discuss said improvements with the mayor's cycling advocacy committee, which we talked a little bit about earlier. My question is, are those meetings open to the public? Are those meetings well publicized? Can the public come to those meetings and discuss any proposed bike lane that is going to be implemented through this policy?
All city council meetings are open to the public.
This is not a city council committee. This is the mayor's bicycling advisory committee. That committee is being tasked with an additional responsibility in which they're gathering public input. Will those meetings be open to the public, and will they be well publicized so that citizens can give that input? And perhaps maybe the larger question for the committee to decide is that the appropriate forum for public input to take place? My second concern is that the perception, maybe not the reality, I recognize that, but the perception is the bike lane on Water Street was probably the greatest single act of government efficiency and effectiveness we've ever seen. It seemed like in a period of 10 days, that thing was up and running. And it conflicts in my own mind, when we can't even take a traffic signal down without going through a 30-day study. That's where the confusion lies within myself. And so I said to myself, self, how can this be? Well, if you look at our codified ordinances in the city of Troy, one section just popped out at me, and it was the second to last paragraph of section 30503. In general, section 30503 grants the city service director wide latitude on multiple traffic control devices. And I'm not going to argue that point today. But it does say, no provision of this section shall be effective until signs, signals, markings, or other devices giving notice of such local traffic regulations are posted upon or at the entrance to the street or part thereof affected, or may be appropriate so that in a proper position they're sufficiently legible to be seen by an ordinary observant person. And I don't recall any signage, any public notice of that taking place on the bike lane itself. My concern and the concerns of many folks that I talked to were not about the bike lanes, but the process in which they were established. It was done very quickly. It was done with literally no public notice other than an article in the newspaper and maybe a couple social media posts. If we can go back, slow some of these processes down, educate our residents while we're studying these improvements, I do believe that we'll come up with a better product that our citizens can enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Estandia. I'm the Executive Director of Bike Miami Valley, live at 417 Adams in Dayton, Ohio. We are the regional voice for cycling. We create opportunities for more bikes in our local communities, and we're excited that Troy is a bike-friendly community. Our advocacy group has been up here to enjoy your restaurants, the Las Bicicletas, artwork that you guys had on the street earlier this summer, and we appreciate those kinds of initiatives that are happening here. And I think this gentleman has summed it up very well, that what we were expecting to see here was some discussion on changes to public input and notice that are happening. We also act as an education group. We're committed to helping Troy become more bike-friendly through education, whether it's educating people about how to ride on street or creating more education materials that educate bicyclists and motorists about what they are supposed to do on the roadway with different types of infrastructure. But tonight, we've had a meeting that started at 5 o'clock, ends at 7. I know there are people here in the audience who have spouses at home that are taking care of their children, who would maybe have liked to have been here, but there's no child care offered. Being creative about how you're reaching out to people can make a big difference in the implementation of a project, having it in a more public space, a more accessible building. These are all things that can be done to improve the public input process and to make people aware of things before they happen. So we are here to act as a resource for the city to walk through some of these things and also provide more education within the community itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I say a couple words?
Sure.
My name is Roger Quinlan. I live at 2652 Renwick Way, out west of town in 55. I'm an avid cyclist. I ride a couple, 3,000 miles a year. Spend a lot of time riding around the Miami Valley. We have fantastic set of trails here to connect towns and so forth. And I'd just like to say it's a little bit disappointing to me. I'll ride anywhere. All right, country roads, I won't ride an interstate, but I'm comfortable riding just about anywhere. It's disappointing to me to see this great trail network and other towns who are taking advantage of connecting through their towns, and we're not doing as good a job as we could there. And so I'd just like to state that as an opportunity for us to improve Troy's reputation and draw more people in for cycling. By the way, cyclists do help the quality of life here, and people make choices about the towns they live in based on amenities like cycling. So it isn't just tourists. So a couple things I'd just like to state that I think could be beneficial. It's wonderful that the council is trying to improve the cycling situation in town. And I hope that we can find a solution that really can do a better job. I'm not a fan of either of the lanes that we're talking about for various reasons. I'm not going to go into detail about them. Other people have stated their cases quite well. But there's an opportunity here to help people find their way through town. We get them to town great on the trails, great set of trails. Our trails, I think you know, are the largest number of miles of paved trails that are contiguous in the U.S. That is just fantastic. But when they get to Troy, they don't know what to do. And so helping them with that type of finding their way through town and to businesses and to activities really strikes me as a very important thing that would be worth spending time on. As a resident of the west side, we're out in the Kensington subdivision off of 55. I have a particular concern about access to town via bicycle. I have no problem doing it. I've ridden 55, I'll come in on swales. that's fine. But it really makes me nervous to bring my kids into town because they're not comfortable riding in traffic, and there's a large population out in that area that really has no safe way to get into town. And I think that would help bolster a cycling lifestyle and more family-type riding as well. So I want to make that point. So kudos to you for working on this. Hopefully we can get a better solution than we've had so far. Thanks.
I would reiterate, people have biked in Troy for years, and it's gone well. Personally, I'd love to see more signage, more shared lanes, at least for starters, and then go from there. The west side out Stony Creek, or Stonebridge, they also want a way in, but that is to be worked on, and that is part of the process.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
this evening, we actually came here because of a recommendation Mr. Lutz spoke to. The recommendation that was brought to us is to amend the Troy Complete Streets policy. The amending of this policy, I think, speaks to a lot of the things that we've discussed, which is to have more open lines of communications, a stronger check and balance. You mentioned the advocacy group. At this point, we've not been an active part of the decision-making. This puts us in play a little bit. So what I would like to do, if I'm in order, is to bring forth the recommendation to amend the Complete Streets program so that we could pass it on to council.
I'm in favor of that. Can we answer Mr. Lutz's question as to whether or not the public can attend, can be in those advocacy meetings?
Initially, that was an ad hoc committee that I tried to put together to look at opportunities to bring people into our community, hopefully to stay into our community as an amenity. People have referred, or at least it's been referred to, that we need jobs. The fact is, in our workforce in Troy, Ohio, the business community and industries in the community have those jobs. We need the people to take those jobs. So jobs are not the issue. We're trying to find the amenities, or at least this mayor has always been here about a quarter of a century as an elected official by people. And during that time, I've always said, we need recreation, we need safe communities, and those are the two issues I kept hearing over and over again. And to do that, we need to have the amenities, the quality of life that I'm so proud that we're working on to bring into our community, that brings those people, hopefully, maybe tourists, but they always go out and they feel good about our community. And they may bring their families sometimes back to us. And so I wanted you to know this committee was formed to be that ad hoc committee to think of ideas, to be a think tank, and they have done a great job. We have brought a lot of new ideas, new events and activities by that. They have never been a legislative group. They were an ad hoc group to provide ideas, much the same as the Mayor's Youth Council that we have formed, and they give us ideas.
So is the public allowed to attend?
So, the invitation is they meet whenever they can get enough people together on their committee. It isn't a public forum necessarily. If they want to come, be a part of that, I think that's up to the chairman of the committee or any of the other members to bring others involved in that have that same motivation, interest, to give back to a community. I heard John say earlier, we have to have vision. We have to move forward. If we don't move forward, we're going backwards.
Troy wouldn't be where it is now.
Pardon me?
Troy wouldn't be where it is now if people hadn't had vision.
Thank you, Robin. And I think we need to sometimes step back in a world of tension, in a world of where things, We have a lot of good things going in Troy, Ohio. And people, and I know there's people in the audience that live outside of Troy, would attest to this, that Troy, and the last gentleman shared that as well. We have a lot of good things, and sometimes we need to take a step back and think of the positive, not the negative things, and what we can do to tweak it to make it even better. We heard some of those ideas. Wayfinding signs, we have discussed that. We know we need to improve that. And we are working on that. There is another initiative taking place that deals with that, and Patrick did a very nice job sharing how many people are involved in that process. Access to town is something that I've been saying, we've got a great network. We heard that tonight. But we need to get it across the river so that our business community benefits from that. And I see we're trying to make efforts with a business-friendly effort. That's positive, and that's a good thing. And we're trying to find bike racks. We're trying to do those things that we need to do to enhance things. I am very, and I will say this, Lester brought this up a couple weeks ago. We need to educate, and I heard John reinforce that, we need to educate not only bicyclists, but our motorists on the rules of the road, so that we don't blow through stoplights or stop signs, both ways. So that, and you said that, Robin, earlier. These are the things, education is what we got to start working on as well. So those are the things, you know, I've been preaching that for years. Being an educator, I guess that comes out, so. But we need to do that. So Robin, to answer your question, it never was intended to be a legislative committee. They are an ad hoc to the mayor to give ideas, much the same as the Mayor's Youth Council and other committees that I appoint all the time to give input. They're not public forums like council, committees, the things that are legislative. We have to remember we have 3 branches of government in this statutory form of government we have in Troy, Ohio. Legislative is one of those branches, and that's public. Thank you. for
The
letting me-
discussion will go on, I'm sure.
There will.
So we are amending the,
You're requesting legislation
yes.
to amend.
We are recommending that. I want to go forward with my recommendation to have an ordinance to return the Adams Street bike lane.
I don't think
That's got to be
We need to
either
know
majority or
where the
minority
committee
report.
stands on that one.
No.
No.
Then I will do a minority report recommending that.
I think you can.
I think that's it. Discussion continues. We'll talk later. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for your time. I know it's been very long. Appreciate your comments.
Meeting adjourned?
Meeting adjourned.